Human geography is one of the two major branches of geography together with physical geography. Human geography is also called cultural geography. It is the study of the many cultural aspects found throughout the world and how they relate to the spaces and places where they originate and the spaces and places they then travel to as people continually move across various areas. Some of the main cultural phenomena studied in human geography include language, religion, different economic and governmental structures, art, music and other cultural aspects that explain how and or why people function as they do in the areas in which they live. Globalization is also becoming increasingly important to the field of human geography as it is allowing these specific aspects of culture to travel across the globe easily. The study of the interrelationship between people and place and environment and how these vary spatially and temporally across and between locations, whereas physical geography concentrates on spatial and environmental processes that shape the natural world and tends to draw on the natural and physical sciences for its scientific underpinnings and methods of investigation. Human geography concentrates on the spatial organization and processes shaping the lives and activities of people and their interactions with places and nature. Human geography is more allied with the social sciences and humanities, sharing their philosophical approaches and methods. Human geography consists of a number of subdisciplinary fields that focus on different elements of human activity and organization. For example, cultural geography, economic, health, historical, political, population, rural, social, transport and urban geography. What distinguishes human geography from other related disciplines such as development, economics, politics and sociology are the application of a set of core geographical concepts to the phenomena under investigation, including space, place and nature. These concepts foreground the notion that the world operates spatially and temporally and that social relations do not operate independently of place and environment, but are thoroughly grounded in and through them. With respect to methods, human geography uses the full sweep of quantitative and qualitative from across the social sciences and humanities, mindful of using them to provide a thorough geographic analysis. It also places emphasis on fieldwork and mapping and has made a number of contributions to developing new methods and techniques, notably in the areas of spatial analysis, spatial statistics and GI science. The long-term development of human geography has progressed in tandem with that of the discipline more generally. Since the quantitative revolution in 1950s and 60s, the philosophy underpinning human geography research has diversified enormously. The 1970s saw the introduction of behavioral geography, radical geography and humanistic geography. These were followed in the 1980s by a turn to political economy, the development of feminist geography and the introduction of critical social theory underpinning the cultural turn. Together, these approaches formed the basis for the growth of critical geography and the introduction of postmodern and post-structural thinking into the discipline in the 1990s. These various developments did not fully replace the theoretical approaches developed in earlier periods, but rather led to further diversification of geographic thought. For example, quantitative geography continues to be a vibrant area of geographical scholarship, especially through the growth of GI science. The result is that geographical thinking is presently highly pluralist in nature, with no one approach dominating. Cultural landscapes are more important to the field because they link culture to the physical environments in which people live. A cultural landscape can either limit or nurture the development of various aspects of culture. For instance, people living in a rural area are often more culturally tied to the natural environment around them than those living in a large metropolitan area. This is generally the focus of the man-land tradition in the 4 traditions of geography, which studies the human impact on nature, the impact of nature on humans, and people's perception of the environment. Culture is a critical part of how human beings and arguably a few animals exist in the world, but it is notoriously difficult to define precisely. Culture is shared because it involves things people do together or in the same way. Culture is about patterns rather than one-time idiosyncrasies, and culture involves both people's overt behaviors, that is swinging a stick to one side, as well as the meanings or interpretations people have of them, that is hitting a home run. Every person participates in one or more cultures. A person without culture would be unable to figure out what's going on in their world and successfully navigate it. Some people, particularly middle class white Americans, like to imagine that they don't have any culture. This is usually based on a mistaken belief that culture consists only of tradition that people do for the sake of tradition, or that having culture involves being brainwashed into acting certain ways. An important concept in talking about culture is the idea of a social or cultural structure. Structures are rules or habits that guide people to consistently act and think in a certain way rather than another. Structures are important to people's ability to get along in the world. We wouldn't be able to meet our needs and advance our goals if we didn't have consistent patterns of behavior to help us decide what to do and to count on others following. All there is in the world is lots of people saying she is rather than she are, and Microsoft Word being programmed to put a green squiggly line under she are when one type it. But structures are also not just statistical regularities in people's behavior. The way laws in natural science are just regularities in the way that, for example, increased carbon concentrations in the atmosphere led to warmer temperatures. People are constantly moving through space. Migration varies from temporary relocation, often for work or schooling, to a permanent uprooting of connections to their old home and putting down roots in their new one. Geographers often only apply the label migration to more permanent and long distance moves, but such migration is just one end of a spectrum of human movement through space. Extensive human migration has a long history. Our species Homo sapiens evolved in East Africa about 2 lakh years ago. The earliest modern human fossils found outside of Africa are about 1 lakh years old. The descendants of these first pioneers continue to spread through the world, reaching Australia by 60 to 50,000 years ago, Europe by 40,000 years ago, and Americas by 20 to 15,000 years ago. Once humans arrived in a new place, they did not stay put. At a broad scale, massive migrations such as the Bantu expansion in Africa or the waves of people moving out of the steppes of Central Asia continue to alter the genetic and cultural makeup of areas. These movements could be driven by a variety of political, ideological, economic or environmental factors. At a more local scale, subsistence systems often required movement over the course of the year or several years. There is a common misconception that non-agricultural societies wander aimlessly or opportunistically over the land. In fact, hunter-gatherers and animal herders usually have well-defined yearly rounds accessing a series of resources that become available in different ecological zones at different times. A variety of factors may influence a person's decision about whether, where and how to migrate. We commonly summarize these as push factors and pull factors. Push factors are things that make someone want to leave their current location. Economic troubles, persecution, war or other violence and environmental crisis are all common push factors. Pull factors are things that make a particular destination attractive. Economic opportunities, political freedom and cultural or ideological significance such as the importance of the land of Israel to Jews may constitute important pull factors. Depending on the strength of the push and pull factors, migrants may have more or less choice about where to move. At one extreme, the African slave trade gave its victims no choice about whether to leave and where to go. In addition to the push and pull factors, migrants also face barriers to their movement that alter their calculations about how to migrate. Sometimes these barriers may be physical, such as an ocean or a desert. Other times they are the result of social policy. Although most of the 2 lakh years that Homo sapiens has existed, there were no such things as cities, as humans lived in small, usually nomadic bands. The first cities emerged some 10,000 years ago in places like Jericho in what is now called Palestinian territories and 𝗕𝗏𝗄𝗃 in what is now Turkey. At present, over half of the world's population, and which is normally growing, lives in cities, an unprecedented level of urbanization in human history. The structure and experience of urban landscape is thus crucial to human geography today. We need to understand why people congregate in cities and what happens when they do. It is surprisingly difficult to define what exactly makes a city or where a given city boundaries lie. City growth means municipal boundaries rarely correspond to the functional boundaries of a city. For example, the city of Sydney proper is home to only 1,17,000 of the over 4 million people who live in the Sydney urban area. The density of settlement typically shades off gradually from the high rises of the central business district to the open spaces of the rural fringe, making it difficult to draw a clear boundary. Generally speaking, we can define cities by 2 key characteristics. They have a high density and intensity of human interaction, and they serve as major nodes in wider cultural, economic or other networks. Cities are then places where people come together. Cities are defined and made possible by their location within networks that extend beyond the city. A city is sustained by its economic, political, cultural and environmental connections to other places.